Okay, well, everyone, welcome to online Bible class this Sunday. This is our MDY Bible class every week for right now, while the pandemic is going on, and who knows how long. Today is super exciting. Today is our second Sunday with our new format and different people joining us, and we have Chloe Baumgardner joining us today, and I really appreciate her. She's actually not feeling super well and has kind of been in quarantine this week, and but she was gracious enough to join us. So Chloe, tell us, so what's been going on with you the last few days?
Yeah. Well, it was my birthday, so that was really exciting.
Very
And I
cool.
turned 18. And then I don't know, I just did a lot of things with friends. And one of my friends actually got sick with COVID. So she informed me. So now I'm quarantined and I'm probably getting COVID, but I don't really know.
Okay, well, I mean, that's just our life right now. I think, I mean, I guess we're all going to get it at some point, but um, maybe better to get it over with soon. Well, I hope you get well soon, and if you've got it, that it doesn't get too bad for you. You're not too miserable. Um, hey, so I also want to let everybody know that the internet is kind of spotty right now, and Chloe and I are both like freezing up on each other, and so you may see a little bit of that, but we're going to push through it and just um, and just get this taken care of. So um, today we are in the book of James again. This is our third week in James, and we are in verses 9 through 12. And I think we actually want to read from a couple of different versions because they're they really speak in a little bit different way. And Chloe, do you want to go ahead and read read yours from the ESV version?
Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation. Because like a flower and grass he will pass away, for the sun rises with the scorching heat and withers the grass. Its flowers fall and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him.
Okay, thank you. So that was the ESV, English Standard Version, I think is what it's called. And I want to read it for us in the New Living Translation, a little bit different. And so mine says, believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. And those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. They will fade away like a flower in the field. The hot sun rises and the grass withers, and the flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. In the same way, the rich will fade away with all their achievements. God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Okay, so it's a little bit kind of an odd passage when you just start reading into it, because it's like so much about kingdom truth. It's like kind of the opposite of what you would think it would say. And so Chloe, I want to ask you kind of what you took away from this passage, what your thoughts are about it. Maybe specifically to start out with, like verses 9 and 10, 9 through 11, what you saw there.
Um, what I took away from it is I kind of put myself in the perspective of James and what he was trying to tell us in this. And I think Well, I believe he was trying to tell us to ultimately, instead of focusing on the worldly things, to focus on the greatness of our relationship with God. And so he portrayed that in two different forms, in the form of a rich man who's prideful and a humble man who is poor. And what I kind of, I translated it a bit, and I said living with poor circumstances. So I guess I don't know, putting it into my own words, us as Christians, we have, or just people in general, we have this ability to change our perspectives on circumstances in reality. And so I think we can be in a circumstance where we're feeling really down, depressed, anxious, whatever the case may be, and but we could be looking towards our relationship and God. And I think that's what the humble man is portraying in these verses. Is he's he's in a poor circumstance, but he's still living humbly and looking towards Christ. But the same can go for the prideful man. You can be filled with pride, and you can be only focusing on the worldly things, but you have that chance to change your perspective and look at your relationship with God and make it stronger and live by that.
Okay, that's super good. I really like how you drew out of there the idea of perspectives, um, and I really think that's what, yeah, I think that's very much what James is saying, that God gives us that new perspective. God can help change our perspective, and then also, I mean, yeah, like you're drawing like all the right stuff out of there, and um, I think really when he talks about a rich man, he's also talking about not necessarily somebody who's rich with wealth, but somebody who's prideful. And you talked about that. And you know, for those who are struggling with self-worth, or for those who are struggling to think too highly of themselves, I mean, God brings the two together. I mean, he really can change our perspective, and that's good, because um, what God does, he brings us truth, and the truth is that somebody who has nothing is really, they really do have great worth, and somebody who's worth a lot um, in worldly riches is really in the same boat. I mean, God gives them all the worth they have. So I wanted to come back to verse 12 with you and just ask, how do you think verse 12, verse 12 really doesn't tie in necessarily with this passage. It really kind of segues into the next one, but I think it ties the two together. How do you see verse 12 connecting to what we just talked about in 9, 10, and 11?
So when I was reading these verses, I was struggling with just kind of getting anything out of it, because I've read these verses before, but I wanted to get something new out of it. So I actually asked for some friends' perspectives on it. And I think what one of my friends says, I think it kind of relates to verse 12. And she was talking about just people in life and people in this world in general, but specifically people at school and in our country right now. She says, when a prideful man falls, they fall hard because they don't have the relationship that the humble man does. And I think that either can fall, but it's like the humble man almost when he falls, he can fall just as hard, but he always goes back to Christ and he's always looking at his position with Christ. But when the prideful man falls, he's he's worried about the things that he's lost and the things that he doesn't have. And
Yeah.
I think that's what verse 12 is relating back to the other verses.
Okay. Yeah. Very, very cool. I had this visual the other day. I was out on a bike ride with my son, and when we were done, there's this family that came off the trails, and there's this little bitty kid. I mean, like maybe 4 years old, and he came out and he wasn't wearing a helmet, and I was like, man, those parents are terrible. But then Colin was like, well, Daddy's so low to the ground, he doesn't have far to fall, so it's probably not going to hurt him. And I was like, I think maybe this kind of relates, um, because later in James it says, God says, I will lift up, if you humble yourself before me, I will lift you up. And I think, so someone who's so prideful and puts themselves up so high, um, that fall is a long, hard fall. And then the humble person is kind of like that little kid, like little toddlers when they're learning to walk. It's like they don't get hurt that much. I mean, they're falling constantly, but they don't get hurt that much because they're already so low to the ground. And I think it's kind of like that when we humble ourselves. Even when we mess up, we're able to just take it. And so, how, just to kind of wrap up a little bit, how do you think just knowing this truth helps us as believers help other people? um, and maybe it goes back to that attitude thing you were talking about at first, but
Well, I think for me, um, just I don't know, just from my faith, I would say I've gone through trials in my life. I actually just came out of a season of a bunch of trials on top of each other. So since I just came out of that, I know that, and since I've had other trials in my life that I've gone through, I know that he um I know that he can pull us out of that, and he's changed my perspective on a lot of things in life. And I view life a lot differently than I used to view life. It's just I
hmm,
think it's also just growing up and just
yeah.
gaining knowledge of other people as well. And so since I know all of these things, I think talking to people, being vulnerable, being honest with other people about how he really can change your perspective on things. Maybe the person you're talking to, I don't know if you're talking to anybody, but maybe you are, and they just have a really bad perspective, or maybe not a bad perspective, but not a perspective they want to have, and maybe their perspective can change. Just talking to you, knowing what you've been through. I don't know. I think it's just being vulnerable with others.
Okay, yeah, that's super good. And so, like, rather than hiding the challenges we've gone, rather than hiding the dark times and the difficult times, um, sharing those with people can maybe help give them a perspective that they wouldn't come on their own. And so that's really good wisdom to share. Well, man, okay, so we I guess need to wrap up to keep our time frame kind of short, but I super appreciate you sharing with us and you being vulnerable with us, and just letting us know about how you've learned some of these truths, kind of maybe even the hard way, through difficult times. Um, and I'm sure that somebody listening to this needs to hear that and be reminded of it, because what I find is I've gone through a lot of difficult times in my life, and then when I get in the next one, I will forget for a period of time what God has done. And then at one point, either somebody says something like you today that reminds me, or something happens. I'm like, oh, yes, he has been faithful in the past, and I need to be patient and wait on him to work. And so that's really, really helpful to know. So, okay, well, Chloe, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for helping share the Bible lesson with us today. I really appreciate it. Anyway, have a great week. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.